Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump and his allies continue to lie about the federal response to Hurricane Milton and Helene. In a post on social media yesterday, Trump called the response to Helene, quote, the worst in U.S. history. In a Wall Street Journal op-ed published yesterday, Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, continued to run with the lies started by the former president last week, writing, quote, under Ms. Harris and Mr. Biden, FEMA has funneled millions of dollars to non-governmental organizations whose stated goal is facilitating mass migration into the U.S. None of that is true, although it is something Trump did as president right in the middle of hurricane season back in 2019. And while campaigning on Trump's behalf in Arizona yesterday, the second highest ranking Republican in the House, Majority Leader Steve Scalise, also pushed that lie. Take a look at that and the response from Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday to the misinformation being spread by Trump.
FEMA, among a whole bunch of other federal agencies, has been using your tax dollars that are supposed to help you as American citizens if you get some kind of disaster, and every community gets them. They use that money helping illegals here that they brought into America, to get hotel rooms that they're destroying, free cell phones, food, shelter, all of those things. And then when an American needs help from their federal government, they say, oh, we're spread too thin and we're out of money.
It's profound, and it is the height of irresponsibility and, frankly, callousness. Yeah. So lives are literally at stake right now. And the idea that somebody would be playing political games for the sake of himself, but this is so consistent about Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. He puts himself before the needs of others. I fear that he really lacks empathy on a very basic level to care about the suffering of other people and then understand the role of a leader is not to beat people down, it's to lift people up. Absolutely. Especially in a time of crisis.
So, Jonathan Lemire, the big lie moves around, whether it's wreaking havoc on our constitutional republic with the lie about the election or the lies about January 6th, to lies that actually impact people's day-to-day lives and their safety, whether it's about Haitians, legal migrants in Springfield, making their lives miserable, and people in the town, the city of Springfield, now to people in disaster zones who are being fed misinformation and they don't understand and know what is true and what is not true. This, again, is what this election is about, what the choice is about.
Yeah, these are lies from Donald Trump and his allies that put people's lives in danger. These are extraordinarily dangerous. We are still seeing in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, people who are not trustful of the federal response, of officials who are there, FEMA representatives encountering some tense situations when they find people in particularly like Western North Carolina who are still obviously suffering and isolated after what happened there. And now we have local officials really concerned about the impact here in Florida. We heard from President Biden yesterday kind of go out of his way to strike a bipartisan tone and say, look, I spoke to Governor DeSantis. We're offering our help.
The governors will also, they will say, yes, we spoke to the president.
Yes, I mean,
we're getting what we need.
Right. Governor DeSantis did not take a call from the vice president, but he did take it from President Biden. He has said that has happened. Other governors, including Republican in Georgia, said, yes, we spoke to the White House. They have been helpful. But it's local officials right now who are deeply concerned. We just interviewed the mayor of Fort Myers, Florida, in the storm's path on Way Too Early a few minutes ago, and he acknowledged misinformation, disinformation, a real issue. And he urged residents to turn to trusted sources, including the local government's website, to say, look, this is what you need to hear. You need to get out, listen to us. Everything Trump's saying is just clouding the picture and making it more dangerous.
Yeah, you want to too about the editorial standards of the Wall Street Journal op-ed page, which we respect and read all the time and talk about on the show, just publishing uncritically what J.D. Vance is saying about the management of this hurricane. But we've been saying it now for, since Helene hit, and Donald Trump has been saying these things. What a disgusting moment to go right to lies and to go right to division when people need unity, they need help. That, by the way, as John points out, they're getting. The Republican governors of Tennessee and Georgia, and Ron DeSantis is saying as well that FEMA's doing a good job, that they're here, they're on the ground. We talked to Governor Cooper yesterday of North Carolina, who said the same thing. It's a very difficult moment. There's destruction everywhere you look, but we are getting the help. But Donald Trump cannot help himself, and J.D. Vance is the number 2 guy. He's the beta in the relationship. He has to echo the lie, of course.
Absolutely.
But my gosh, what an appalling time to do that.
First of all, our hearts and prayers go out to the folks who are in the eye of the storms. But it seems to me it's not only bereft; it's a reflection of a kind of moral depravity, right? So that you translate people's sorrows into grievance.
These people's lives are on the line.
Right, and you're translating people's tragedy into grievance and hatred. It shows you the nature of the political calculus that's informing these folks. It's just morally depraved in my view.
Yeah, no, and also it impacts overall. I mean, this is not, I don't think, a leap, Richard Haass, when you look at what's happening in this country and you have the system breaking down from top to bottom because the former president keeps trying to poke holes in what is our constitutional republic and our systems of responding to people and federal aid getting to people. Doesn't that impact the way that NATO allies and others around the world are looking at us and watching this election ever so closely?
Yeah, so many reactions. There's nothing sacred anymore.
Nothing.
That's it.
Nothing matters.
There's no norms. There are simply no norms, or there are norms. There's just no acceptance of them or of observation of them. Yeah, I've just come from Germany this week, and the rest of the world doesn't get a vote, but boy, are they worried. They are affected, obviously, by what happened here fundamentally. And it's not just foreign policy, and that's what it connects with what you said, Mika. The impact of the United States in the world is not just what the State Department does or the military does. It's who we are. It's the example we set. And when people see things like this, again, it gets to the core. They don't recognize this United States, and they worry if we're this divided about the most obvious human crisis, how are we going to ever be there for them?
Well, and as I've said before, in the middle of the Clinton administration, when things were as heated as we thought they could ever be, Republicans and Democrats worked together. Right? First year, we had 3 hurricanes come ashore in Northwest Florida. Bill Clinton was there. I told everybody when they first I said, no, you want the President of the United States there. You want him there. You want everything that comes with the President of the United States there. And that's what every governor, Governor of Tennessee, Willie, Governor Lee, a very conservative Republican. Governor McMaster in South Carolina, very conservative governor. Of course, Governor Kemp in Georgia, overwhelmingly popular governor. And you have Senator Thom Tillis in North Carolina. All of these officials have been saying that the White House and the administration is doing a great job. And they're very grateful. Ron DeSantis saying he's gotten everything he's asked for. And this is, no standards. One of the things I always tell people when they spread conspiracy theories is go to the Wall Street Journal. I said it's a Murdoch paper. Go to the Wall Street Journal. I don't tell them always go to the Wall Street Journal editorial page, but as you point out, the Wall Street Journal is publishing disinformation that might as well be in Epoch Times. And the fact that it's from a vice presidential candidate matters not. This is the same guy who lied about cats and dogs being eaten while the governor of his own state said stop. This is when you say there are no standards. This is a perfect example of it, Willie. There's lies every day. There's people that right here in the Wall Street Journal that I've respected for decades who are trying to pretend this is just any other election. There are people that I've known my entire life that they're engaging in this anti-Trumpism. Where, oh yeah, well sure, and I've said this before. Sure, yeah. So Donald Trump is lying about eating cats and dogs, and Donald Trump's lying about hurricanes, and Donald Trump tried to overthrow the 2020 election results. But did you see Kamala Harris's third answer on The View? No, but we laugh. They're dead serious. And we've seen this for 4 years. We've seen, a very respected U.S. senator who went on to work at a university, told friends, he said, yeah, January 6th, okay, whatever. But did you see what Biden did with student debt relief? I don't want the Democrats to ever complain about the riots on January. See, again, this flattening out that we talk about, and here when people are in such misery and suffering, you have the Wall Street Journal editorial page running disinformation, running lies that the Republican governor of Georgia, the Republican governor of South Carolina, the Republican governor of Tennessee, the Republican governor of Virginia, Republican senator of North Carolina, there's a Democratic senator of North Carolina also say it, all of the local leaders, all of the state officials, Republican and Democratic alike, are saying this administration is doing everything that we have asked of it. And yet, disinformation spreads, even in sources that used to be above that.
And again, at a time of great suffering, which is to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the people who follow him, the politicians who follow him, this is a political game. This is a moment to create some division, to get support.
Spot.
It is, and you know, on a lesser scale, the Springfield, Ohio was the same. People were suffering because of the lies they were telling, and they just didn't care because they thought there was some political benefit to that. And you're right, Joe. I mean, there are people who will say of January 6th, but student loan debt, or pick your issue, and they look the other way. And they listen to what Donald Trump says over the people who are actually on the ground in this case, the mayors, the governors, saying, no, it's a terrible scene, but we're getting the help we need from FEMA and the Biden administration. But if you talk to people we know and friends of ours, they'll go, did you hear? They're actually using the money that they should have been using to rebuild Americans' homes to give cell phones to illegal immigrants. Yeah. We're going to hear about this.
Right.
People we know. Right. Why aren't you guys covering it and all that? So the Donald Trump lie blocks out the truth among Republicans, among MAGA Republicans.
The corrosive effect has been shocking. Right. I've been shocked by all the people who have been swept up in it and who are cynically playing along for whatever the reasons. I mean, there's a reason why Dick Cheney, why Liz Cheney, why Ken Edelman, why over 100 Republicans that have worked for the Reagan administration, Bush 41, Bush 43, the Trump administration, have come out and said they're voting for Kamala Harris. There are still people, though, unfortunately,
country over party,
that are putting not only party but also their personal financial interests over what's best for America.
For sure.